From the bench to the bleachers, you are listening to the only podcast in Ontario that keeps you in the game.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's do this.
My next guest on In the Game is the son of legendary doctor and surfer Doc Paskowitz. Yes, that is Adam Paskowitz, the lead singer of the band known as The Flies. Adam and his family have been trekking around the world, and I've been able to catch up with them now. There we go. You can hear me, eh?
How's that, eh?
Not bad, Adam. How you doing? I got to say this first. I finally got you where I want you. On the show, man. So I guess I have Tracy to thank for that. Probably is she the one that was messaging?
Yeah, she's my wife. She used to be our tour manager back in the day.
Awesome. So yeah, no, I want to thank you for jumping on the show. Yeah, it's been like a month and a half. I've had some really good guests in between trying to get you on the show, and actually some of the guests know you. So it's pretty unique to see how small the world is out there, right? But let's kick things off with where are you now? Like a lot of people that don't know you per se outside of the band The Flies. I mean, that's how I first knew you. Was we used to sing acoustic tunes. We used to rock out to you guys. But as I looked you up years ago, I noticed the surfing. I noticed the I'll hate the term environmentalist. It's more conservationist. And you're traveling. Where are you now?
Well, we ended up in New Zealand. We took a boat pretty much 2/3 of the way around the world. And then some crazy New Zealander guy bought our boat. And so we headed back to the United States, and we did actually a lot of travel in Canada. We went from the Cook Islands to pretty much we went up to, that area called the Great Bear Rainforest?
Yep.
And we made amazing friends up there with the people, and so we just stayed there for a long period of time, and we starved because it's so funny, like we really did like what your basic white guy does. You go to an area, like you can't figure it out, you starve, and then First Nation guy comes up and is like, hey, what are you doing? You're not doing it right. So anyway, we made huge friends up there, and that's where we stayed. Well, this whole, as we roll into all this, the whole coronavirus and everything. So now we're in Southern California, just hanging out, waiting for this to kind of end in some ways. We have taken some NorCal trips, Northern California, but in general, we are in Southern California now. We're looking for a new boat, and we're kind of riding this out. We had plans to go do a really great submarine trip with the guys from Triton Submarines, and it just fell apart.
Your story, it's unique, right? Like, as a child growing up, so I live in Ontario, farm area. It's caught in the middle of, industrial and city like Toronto, right? But we spent time in the Muskokas or up in Algonquin in Ontario, which was, it's parks, right? It's lakes. And as a child, I spent a lot of the time on a boat, wearing moccasins, trekking through the bushes, fishing. So right away, my youth came back to me when I started following what you were doing. My youth, something I lost, right? I mean, something I was passionate about, which, was hunting or fishing or living on nothing. That whole, it's, as soon as I saw what you were doing with your family, I was like, this guy's amazing, right? It's an excuse that society as a whole is using why they can't do that. And when I'm seeing you guys go out there, let's explain to the listeners or the viewers first when we air this that you guys sold everything off as a family. You would have had some royalties probably coming in from music, correct?
Yeah.
Now, you guys, when you started this, did you have any of your children at that time?
Yeah. So I have my son, Doc, who was named after my dad, Doc Paskowitz, Dorian Doc Paskowitz, who was like one of the first surfers in, Southern California and subsequently the world. And so right after we had Doc, we were traveling around in an Airstream, kind of like living the sort of reinvention of like what I had been raised in a camper with all my brothers and sisters surfing in Southern California and throughout the world. And then so we sort of did that, but then we realized like, God, like we haven't pushed the envelope at all. I had this long talk with my dad and he was like, look, son, maybe what it is that maybe you do it by boat. So we started with a sailboat and we learned to sail and we sold everything we had. I took all my music gear, everything, and I just put it all into this boat, which was like a 50-foot sailboat. And we learned to sail in Florida, and then we crossed the Gulf. And so we very quickly, because I'd been a waterman my whole life, it was a nice fit. I remember my wife saying to me, there's very little difference between being the lead singer of a band and being a pirate captain, like just being a captain, right? So I was like, because when my career was starting to wind down, I should say when the whole music business started to wind down, right? All of rock music was winding down. It wasn't just us. I was like, damn, what else am I going to do? And she was like, well, if you think about it, like being the, leader of a band is a lot like being the captain of a boat. You deal with everything and anything, and you learn to adapt. And so we very quickly adapted, and that's what started it. We went out into the open ocean. We took these huge, I realize now, risk being so novice. And then I had my daughter, Fancy. And so, there was the four of us just cruising along. And then we had the opportunity with a friend of ours to then go even one step bigger. So my friend Renee and her two kids, and we just said, okay, let's just try to go real far. And that was the opportunity to travel like vast open oceans distances. We really, 23 days at sea and like all the most remote places that a person could go. At that point, we came across what we couldn't believe, which was an enormous amount of floating debris in the water, and it was primarily plastic pollution. And it just changed us. We were just like, what the hell? How can you ignore this? And so that became, our thing. I know that like the Paskowitzes, we're not reinventing the environmental like space, but what we are trying to do is just like the way my dad is, like encourage people that, there is this needed vehicle to change the way people do business. And, it's a shame the coronavirus really hit in a way that, today's, this is a plastic-free July. But even myself, I find I'm just not that as worried about using less plastic when your basic health comes into mind. And we're still trying to do all these things, but in the reality of life, it's pretty tough to deal as an adventurer, as a person of the sea, and then to see, you got to ignore it. And you ignore it for a while, and then you just can't ignore it anymore. So it really made a huge impact. We sold our boat. We came back. We said, okay, we're putting together a foundation with a group of people that let's go try and make an impact on some of the smaller islands, really remote places that had no fault of this whole plastic thing. And that's why we were going to the guys in Spain, the Triton submarines, and they got some amazing equipment that is helpful in that. We partnered with Waste Management on some new technology. And so that's where we stand, 4 months ago before this all went down. But I feel like it's still very rock and roll, like, like we went up to a Blue Lake, I think it was called, Blue Jay Lake, which is in the southern Bentic, and we got our asses kicked on like a biblical level, right? We had to be rescued, ran out of gas. Like, I mean, for real. Like,
but that adds excitement, right? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean,
it would be boring, right? Like life,
oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, yeah.
We have an old Land Rover, you know, and we just like drove it to. I didn't, you know, we just ran out of gas. We flat out ran out of gas, and you know, it made me realize. What my son Doc was like, you know, Paul, breaking down on the land is like. You just wait for someone to rescue you. Breaking down at sea, you just wait to die. And I think that helped. So we, like, when we think about some of the great places that we want to go, there are some amazing places along that north of Vancouver Island, you know, like 200, 300, 400 miles north. And there's all those places where it's just like, I mean, there's more bears than people.
Very, very gorgeous up there. Nanaimo, the islands, all gorgeous places.
Yeah, so we're huge fans.
So,
and when I cross the border, my favorite line ever, when I cross the border on our truck, and the guy says to me, "Hey, so have you got any? You're not carrying any weapons or any guns or any ammo?" I go, "Oh yeah, I am." Oh yeah.
So my question for you is, you know, like you talked about your kids being on the boat. You talked about them kind of evolving with you. I have to give you credit because we pulled, again, we're different than you, right? Because you live that lifestyle, and I wish I was in that lifestyle. But we pulled our son out of the public education system. Right. Our son is in a private system that's a little better, in my opinion. But your system, to me, would be the best. Meaning you're probably homeschooling the kids or doing the basics that they need. Okay, there's no indoctrination going on. There's you know, kids will see postcards with the ocean or pictures. Your kids are seeing it firsthand with the pollution. Your kids are learning how to tie, whether it's sailing knots, they're learning how to hunt, or they're learning how to dive and snorkel. Those are survival skills that if we went into town right now and grabbed kids that were your age, and if I could get them off their iPhones and everything else, I don't think they could survive a week in the woods alone. Whereas your kids, when they get to be adults, will have a better fighting chance of being able to adapt in many situations. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, well, I think it's the ability to love learning. Like learning is hard. Like I became a captain. I figured like if I'm going to call myself a captain, I have to have a license. So I U.S. Coast Guard school, the whole bit. Became a captain. Excuse me.
You got your scuba license too?
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
And all that, right? So
I became a captain. Oh no, look at this guy.
Cutie.
So I became a
That's
captain,
all right.
And it's hard. It was the hardest thing I ever did, and but what my dad taught me, and I believe my wife and I have taught our kids, is the desire to know that learning sometimes is hard, and the desire to learn is sort of something you put in your back pocket. And then if all of a sudden you have to figure out how to start a fire in the rain, or you have to fix a car and you've never done any of those things, you have the ability to really quickly adapt and learn. Like when I was raised in my house, we had none schooling. My dad raised us just on whatever you assimilate from the world, which was basically, he was a doctor and he took all 9 kids and us around in a camper. And so we learned what we saw in the world. So if we were in Eagle Butte, Montana, or we were in Portales, New Mexico, or the south of deep, dark parts of Mexico, we learned what we learned. He never opened a book, but he never said, "Oh, this is how to do math." But he forced us through the process to have a desire to learn. So when it came time, I also have an electrical license. When it came time for me to take my electrical exam, I'd never even done algebra in my life, but I had the desire and the ability to learn. And so I adapted, and I quickly learned, quickly passed that. I see the same thing in Doc and Fancy and God willing in Solomon, is that the desire to learn. It's very hard. It's very hard when, and I have total respect for people that can do it. And because I know I'm not one of those people who sit in a classroom with a bunch of other people and have one thing told to you, and then to be able to assimilate that and to digest that and get something from it, and to, God forbid, even remember it. But when you learn lessons the hard way through nature, they seem to stick. And most importantly, it's that ability to adapt and to learn quickly. So you may not know everything. And I'm sure if I put my kids in school, which I have, they have little gaps here and there. But their ability to catch up is just boggling. It's boggling how fast they catch up, because it's like, oh, that's the task.
But that's because they, in my opinion, probably have been taught to think outside of the box most of their life. And like you said about growing and learning, failure has to do with a lot of it. And in the public school systems, we're not failing kids, we're pushing them through, right? So nature, like you said, gives you challenges, gives you obstacles. You will succeed, but you will fail. But if you find another way to do it, you grow and learn and adapt.
Yeah. I remember we were in Tahiti, and I cleaned out one of the large water strainers that brings in salt water that cools the boat and all this stuff. And I lost the top of it, the top of this big strainer. It was like, I got on the phone, and it was like 3 weeks. It was a lot of money. And I was sitting there thinking, God, it's 80 feet down. It's super clear. I did a big dive. I got to about 65 feet. I could see it, and I could not make it. And I was just like, damn, So I thought, okay, how long will it take me to train to get down to this thing, right? I could see the stupid thing because the water's so clear. And I'm sitting on the swim step of my boat, thinking about how long this is going to take me. And my son Doc had just gone down to a marina and found a guy who had scuba, and was like, my dad will pay you $20 if you just go get this. And I was just like, I didn't even think of that. And in 1 minute, the guy came down, and he came up with like 8 pairs of sunglasses too. I gave the guy 20.
Did you get to keep it? Did you keep any of the pairs at all?
Yeah, he did all of those. But that was just like, I thought to myself, my gosh, now that is an adaptive kid. I'll send you the picture of him. It's hysterical. He's like 9 years old. He's like, Dad, you're going to take 2 weeks to be able to dive another, 20 feet down. This guy did it in like 3 minutes. So that's the kind of adaptive thing. And believe me, that applies in any line of business, in any line of whether you're highly educated or self-educated, or whether you're a man of your hands, a man of your mind. The ability to think outside of the box is the difference today, at least in my opinion, between those that sort of muddle around in middle management and those that all of a sudden just launch. Even things like Facebook and all these companies by individual thinkers, guys that think outside of the box, men and women that just think so differently. I have a friend she's a freediver, and she calls herself a spearfishing woman. And she's like, I don't even know if that's a word. Her name's Kimmy Werner, and she created an entire world. So brilliant. Like, I shoot fish. But I would never think like outside of the box like her. It's like, yeah, I am. Therefore, I am. Like, I created my own entire genre. I'm a spearfisher woman, and I just think that's a product of just like great mental thought. And so I know one thing that my kids have, that like, wow, they are just, they've never been on computers and all that, and like lately they've done that, and it's like they are just instantaneous whizzes on it. Yeah. So I'm pretty proud of that part of it. It's not for everybody, right? Education is not a one size fit all, but for us, traveling around the world and world schooling with some hard STEM, stuff, really has been a great connection.
So going around the world and traveling, obviously lets you meet people, lets you
Yeah.
meet different people. You create friendships, you create bonds. Um, if I read right, like you guys have you done some charity stuff, or you got organizations as well that are happening? Can you tell me a bit about that stuff?
Well, I've helped my brother out for years. My brother Izzy has a nonprofit for kids with autism, and I'm just a flunky. I just help him when I can. But it's pretty amazing. Like, talk about thinking outside the box. He has an autistic son, and he found that when he took him surfing, it just changed his life. And now, I mean, it's been 20 some odd years. Uh, I remember people used to just laugh at us and laugh at him. The idea that, what's the value in this? And today, I run into people that have full-time therapy degrees, and now we know that water therapy and ocean therapy is such a major part of a calming effect on kids with special needs and people with PTSD and the Wounded Warriors Project. So
Well,
I'm like
correct,
super
correct,
proud of that connection.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I'm not a surfing like whiz by any chance, or know a ton about it as you do. But didn't you have a champion, or didn't we have a guy that was a young guy up there that had Asperger's syndrome? Or
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Clay Marzo, he's a kid
yeah,
from Mars, and he's arguably the best surfer in the world. I mean,
yeah.
I, I
They thought something was wrong with them, right? Like the
yeah.
documentary I saw was, this guy's an idiot, the way he doesn't talk, sponsors wanted to drop him. And then when they found out, and he
Yeah.
had some certain, the ocean's probably more the therapy than anything for him, but he's in his own place out there, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, if Clay would have been what you call like a typical person, he would definitely have been world champ. There's not even a question. He is probably the most exciting surfer, pure free surfer that anyone's ever seen. And I'm friends with all, Kelly Slater and all those
Yep.
guys. And I think we all could agree on that. Like, Clay Marzo is probably one of the most dynamic surfers in the world. Uh, you know, he had mannerisms that people used to just think he was, dumb.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and in reality, he was just, he had his own way about him. And I think that's what we're learning now is, like, people don't fit into perfect categories. And I really admire him, and I admire his whole family. And I think that that's a good example of, like, ocean, the healing aspect of the ocean. I have a friend who really just an acquaintance. His name is Jay Nichols, and has a book called The Blue Mind, BLUMIND, Blue Mind, and he really takes apart scientifically how water changes us and how it makes our minds work in clearer ways. My dad used to say he'd go into the ocean ready to blow his brains out, and then he'd come out like a new man. And I do think that that is a real effect. I think that it applies to typical folks and people with special needs, people on the spectrum. And I think that that's an underused um, anomaly and powerful thing. I think if you can get that, if you can see that book, Blue Mind, get it, because it really puts into perspective why, like, even jumping in a bath or a pool, why that just does something special to you, or a lake or a river, anything.
Well, you know what? Now I played semi-pro hockey. I was banged up a lot. I'm 41 now, so the aches are starting to come. I have never felt any better. I know it's synthetic, like it's not, like the Dead Sea or whatever, but I went into a deprivation tank, like a saltwater float tank. Oh, when I came out of there, I had no stress in my body. I had literally no pain for several weeks. Part of it was the floating, due to the salt on. Basically, you're in your correct gravitation. Like gravity pulls us down. That's why we're like this, right? So when you're floating, you're in your neutral position. You're supposed to be in your body. It hurts after 40 minutes, but once you get out of there, I mean, that water and the salt, I've never. I swear by it. People keep coming up to me and say, "What's this thing? Like you float? What's this float thing?" Right? And I'm like, a saltwater tank or a pod or a
Yeah, it's
deprivation.
incredible.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can. I meditate in there, fall asleep, and float. And when I get out of there, there's not a care in the world to me.
Well, for my dad, that was Hawaii. It was like my dad when he became a doctor. He had a lot of stress on him, and he was a big successful doctor in Hawaii, and then he like quit it all, gave up everything, and he decided that he was going to like walk in the footsteps of Jesus, and he went out to Israel and Jordan and Egypt and Lebanon, and he found the ocean there, and part of that was the Dead Sea. And he used to say floating in the Dead Sea was like, it was so incredible that he lived there. Like he posted up there, this is like in the early 50s. Can you imagine what it was like, in 1950, even earlier? My gosh. It was
Why? Yeah, he was 90. What? When he passed?
93.
He was 93, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Long time ago for sure.
Where the lines were all different, and in many ways, you could travel even freer then than you can now. But I do really believe that we do, and I think this coronavirus, I think the COVID whole experience has like shown us that sort of the before and after of the effect of being indoors a lot. And I definitely feel like as a culture, the importance of getting out into whatever that special space is for us. I mean, I know guys, for me, it's the ocean. Like that's my thing. But I know a ton of people that, it's the woods, and it's, or like I know a guy, he's like into the desert, like just crazy into the desert, or the rivers, so whatever is whatever is your bond to nature, like I think it's really important that we do that like regularly, and we do it with sort of an intensity that sort of brings us back. Like we kind of get lost, like
is it a magnetic field? Nature? Is it mindfulness?
I met a guy, and I don't believe in this kind of stuff, but I met a guy that was like, I can't remember what he was. He was a numeric, like, numerological guy, right? And he would be like, and I don't believe in that, but he did say one thing to me that I was really wild. He said, "Are there any waves around the world that you and that spot match?" And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah!" Like they're like I've never like Huntington Beach, like outside of a few rare contests, Huntington and I just can't figure it out. But like there are beaches in Hawaii and Malibu. I'm just like locked. I don't know what it is. And then he looked at the direction of all those waves, like, and they all pointed like northwest or something. He's like, so for you, that's your space. Like that's where you and your space are in line. So I don't know if I believe that it's magnetism as much as just like.
Well, you hear about the bare feet, walking bare feet, and grounding. And I know people that swear by it, like a ton. Yeah. Like, and this is people like you see a crap load of like even bass guitar players in bands like Chris Novoselic. All these guys would always be wearing bare feet, and I know people that say one, it obviously hardens up your feet, and shoes are actually worse for us and our posture than bare feet, right? So they talk about the grounding with the earth, right? I don't know. Right. So.
I think that definitely everybody has that spot where they're just a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more in tune. For me, that spot is like the ocean. For a lot of people, though, like, it could be, it could be the baseball diamond. I know I have a guy, like I know guys that like play baseball a lot, and like they don't even feel normal or hockey players like the ice, right?
Yeah.
My best friend in the world is a goalie. He's short, and he's
got to be crazy then, because goalies are nuts.
Crazy.
Yeah.
He's the craziest person in the world that they met, and he like played semi-pro his whole life, and then he got an offer during, I can't remember what it was, like, I thought it was a strike or whatever it was he got from the, was it the Kings or the Ducks? I'm like, dude, you always wanted to play the Kings, go to the trial. He's like, dude, I'm not going to do that. I go, why? He's like, I'm too crazy. I'm like, what? Like he is like, he finds his moment on the ice. And, you know, it's a little scary. He's also a commercial airplane pilot. So that's a little scary. But his spot, his where he's like in balance, where he finds balance is on the ice. And that brings me to this point, which I think is something my dad said that I think is just crazy important. My dad was always in search of being a round peg in a round hole, being a square peg in a square hole. I think that's what my life has been about. It's been about finding my shape and finding where my shape fits. Not trying to change myself, but just trying to fit in where it fits in. I was raised without money, without education, without a real understanding of the way the modern world worked. I was raised like my brothers and I like wolves. But my dad gave us these gifts that they were like presents that when you opened them in the right places, they were just magical. You know, when I went to Tahiti and you know, surfed in these places, I was just so at ease, and people would say to me, "Oh, go be careful, you know, you go there, you know, you get in trouble or whatever." And I just had this feeling paddling out, you know, big group of guys, and I was just like, it was like I opened that box that my dad had given me, which is like, you know, who I am, what I'm about as a waterman, as a surfer, as an athlete. And I never had a problem. And I feel like that's like just such a radical gift, the ability to adapt. That's such a radical gift, the ability to say, oh, that's how much work it takes. That's how much work I'm going to put in. I think that being a round peg in a round hole is the sort of secret of life. So if you were a hockey player, then damn, if you know, that sounds right. You know what I mean?
Well,
Bob Brady.
Well, that's what I said. You know, like the one you got Gretzky and you got Rob Blake. Rob Blake's is actually the general manager of the Los Angeles Kings right now, and he's actually from my hometown. So it's a little bit of a connection. But my question to you is: so you guys are trekking, or like I can even use the term globetrotting. You take your family, you're going everywhere. This is a big question for me that I want to ask you because it ties with society and people in general. Do you worry about tomorrow or what is next or how am I going to get by, or does anything worry you, or is it a state of mindfulness that this is what we live for?
Well, I think the short answer is yes, I worry a lot.
But is it a worry like where everyone is slugging to the cubicles in the city? They have a mortgage, they have debt, they have a car, they have kids. You know, that stress. Like the short answer for me, or question for me, is that, you know, like mental illness. Like you got to think a lot of society is coming down with these things because of prescription drugs, social media, stress, work. Instead of, I look at you now and you say you worry about tomorrow, but you're probably in a safer spot than half of society is. Do you agree? Or
I think that my worries are more basic, right? And so because of that, I don't think the type of worry that I have, when it's, I think your body, I think, you know, look, we live in these bodies.
Yep.
This is what we got. I don't think that the human body was designed to live in these massive cities, and I think they break down. And I totally agree with you for all those reasons you said. I think that most people that find themselves in life and death situations, it ties on a part of our psyche that doesn't affect us in the same way. You know, your brain and your nervous system are connected, but also separate. So a lot of times when I worry, as you might say, part of my body I feel like that is worried about that is my instinct, and so it's not the same kind of of worry. I worry about weather. I worry about the kids and things like that. But those are directly in line with the body that I have and the mind that I have, and it fits me. I don't. I feel like I don't have answers for the ills of society. I don't have them, and I'm sure that if I was in a full-time situation and doing the same things that most people do, I would have the exact same issues.
Yeah.
But I just simply don't, because I don't do those things. And so my worries is, whether it's at sea or in the ocean, I'm worried about safety. And that's a pretty basic thing to worry about. I do worry about, breakdowns and rogue waves and
Well, and
stuff
your
like
kids,
that.
right? Your kids and your
Yeah.
wife. I mean, that's your life, right?
But that's all. I feel like part of your body that takes care of that is also like your instinct. Like you could be asleep and like your kid will move and you like, it's not your brain. It's kind of like your instinct.
Yeah.
And so it's not always on my psyche, like fear and worry. A lot of my body takes care of a lot of that, just by over and over, like I always say all the time, I used to say to Doc, we started surfing, my son and I would say, hey, we're going to fall. One day you're going to fall. You're going to go underwater. You're going to pop right back up. I will be right there. One day we will fall, but not this day, that's some other day, not this day. And I think like that speed instinct that you develop as an athlete, so much of it happens, by second nature. And so I think that's a big difference. That's a huge difference between stress and worry. Stress is like, the unnatural version.
Stress is something you can't control that you allow to happen, and
Right.
worry you can kind of.
Yeah,
right.
Fear even more so. Like all the guys that I know that ride big waves, like they mitigate fear. I had a conversation with one of my favorite surfers. This guy, his name's Mikey Red. He's in Hawaii, and he's a big, tall Irish guy, right? You wouldn't expect him to be such a charger at Pipeline. And we had this like long conversation about mitigating fear. And after literally an hour and a half of talking about how to deal with big wipeouts and all that, he finally just said to me, you know what? I like it. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
after all this,
as long as he's not getting raked across the rocks and coral, he's good.
And he's like, I'm like, that is the wisdom you're imparting on me? You like it?
So Adam, are you know what, given your life now, and because I want to talk about your dad, because your dad means a lot, and I mean obviously your mom too, and are you thankful? You're obviously thankful your dad walked away from a suit, right? Are you thankful that he walked away from a suit? And I mean, you wouldn't be where you are. You wouldn't have the lifestyle that you did. I mean, he made that choice to, like you said, to leave a profession and create his own path, which now, years later, you have some wisdom. You have some wisdom in you to think for yourself as well. And now it's passing it on to your kids. If he didn't walk away from that job, we wouldn't be having this discussion, right?
Well, I wouldn't be here, right? What are the odds that a Stanford doctor with a successful practice like gives it all up and then spends the rest of his life working for free? My dad didn't retire from being a doctor. He just retired from the medical profession. So for the rest of his life, he took care of people basically for free.
Humanitarian. Humanitarian, right? Like,
yeah. And also another thing that he gifted us that I think is so relevant today is my dad grew up in the South. He grew up in Texas. He was born and raised in Galveston in the 30s, to the 20s and the 30s. So you can imagine what things like racism and sexism and what he saw. My dad was the most pure human being in terms of his ability to judge someone by who they were. Never in our entire life, never in all of knowing him, did my dad ever, was the issue of race or gender and any of those biases that are so prevalent today, and that were such an important conversation today. Can you imagine my dad being completely? I said to someone the other day. I said, I was trying to think, who do I know that is really like has a true pureness of the concept of the way humanity could work, and it was my dad. Like in the 30s in Texas, he was a pure heart, and it must have been like I can't even imagine how he must have stood out like a sore thumb because he didn't see color. He didn't see the way that he didn't judge, I should say, by color, and he was really remarkable. So we were raised with that also. We wouldn't even be here if he didn't go on this journey, and that journey was he wanted to enjoy his life, and surfing was his space that he loved. So he figured, well, I just want to surf, and I want to see the world with my family, and he really was so ahead of his time with that concept. So today, I'm just trying to, carry the torch a little bit because it was awesome for me. Like I just had the best childhood, and I've lived 100 lives already, and I'm so
what is it about surfing? What is it?
I think
I used to be a skateboarder, or I tried to. I was terrible. Maybe a couple ollies, wipe out, and nose grinds. But what is it? What is it about surfing?
Well, I'll say this. For me, surfing is different. I love the ocean, and I was a competitive surfer. Remember, I'm 6th of 9 kids, so by the time I come up, I just want to be like a shredder guy, right?
Yeah.
And, so I went in Hawaii, and I surfed all those contests, and I did very well. And I kind of got burnt out, like because I was just such in the competitive side of surfing. Surfing is such a broad sport, and when it really is it's more like just a connection with the ocean and a connection with nature. Obviously the ocean is full of surfers now, and most guys don't really surf, by a professional surfing standard that well, but they're having a great time. And so for me, I don't know what it is about surfing. I know what it is about the ocean and about water for me.
Yeah. You could just lay there, right? Like
honestly, I'm at that point like where it's getting wet for me. I'm like an avid spear fisherman guy, and I'm also an avid like ocean trash picker upper guy, and and I love like watching my kids surf a guy, and I love taking my daughter out tandem guy. Do I need to get another set wave at Malibu? I don't know. Do I need to I don't know. If when I get out there, I'm very competitive. So it's like music for me. I like all the fun came out of music because it just became about it became very competitive. And I was in music in a really kind of dumb time, 1999, 2000 wasn't that great? I mean, we had Nirvana.
Yeah, I had that discussion with Brian Vander Ark last night from the Verb Pipe. He was on, and we talked about that period, and he was in that 97, 98. That's when the song "The Freshman" came out for them, and just kind of went into, like he said, same thing. It was then it went to like this rap, like Limp Bizkit around like 2000, 2001, and he said that just wasn't us. But to me, the 90s were amazing. Amazing times.
Yeah, the early 90s.
Yeah, man. I mean,
2000, the bloom had come off the rose for me, and I was looking for a new life.
But let's not confuse things. So like anybody that's listening, if they're learning about you now and figuring this out through this episode too, like you're educated.
Yeah, well, I'm self-educated. Yes.
Okay, so like you were self-educated. Did you do like any high school?
No,
nothing. Okay, so as far as for colleges for your any of your siblings, like did any of them go to university or college? Okay, so what people are going to miss out of this is that the experiences when they watch your videos going around, like, I mean, basically the world. I mean, I saw some treks in Canada. I saw you guys got beat up in the rivers there. But I mean, like I said, my oldest is 18, and I see the other people in society at that age bracket. And I worried because I said to my wife, like, they're not going to be able to survive on their own. Like, if mommy and daddy aren't here to take care of them, like, that's not how we raise our kids. Like, it's always about your actions and how you handle and how you react to things and adversity. And I honestly think sometimes that's worth more than a college degree, because some people that are coming out and then all of a sudden they're expecting to get things handed to them, meaning $100,000 a year, a job's handed to them. But then when that doesn't happen, now what?
Yeah.
Now what?
I think you can look at the situation we're in now, where the whole world is developed in sort of a new paradigm of how things are going to go. Well, there was, here in America at least, there's rabid run on toilet paper and rabid run on water and supplies and all these things, and you really see how, as a collective, we've lost some of those skills to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I sort of feel like that's a wake-up call. And I think I've run into some unique young people that I appreciate in that respect. Like, I have a friend, young guy. He decided to take up farming. Right, he went to a really nice college and decided, like, I'm going to be a farmer. Right,
Yeah.
I'm going to take what. And those are the kind of skills that I think, as we go forward, we're realizing
We're losing them, man.
barbers and farmers and blacksmith and all these things that have things that are made in our environments, made by your hands, made locally, that don't rely on an entire structure of boats, trains, planes, and automobiles that bring things to us. Those are some unique skills now. All of a sudden, what's old is new. It would be really amazing if that same thing came back to the need for music. How cool would that be, right?
Yeah.
Like, if it was like all of a sudden there was this new unbelievable desire for music, which is
music to me. And I can take a line from Kurt Cobain. And I mean, that was my, when I was about 13, 14, that's who I listened to. Unfortunately, he passed away probably when I was about 14. But music is what he said. Music is the food of life. That's what he said. Music is the food of life. And I think what he meant by that is it emotionally connects you. It inspires you. It spurs your creativity, maybe makes you think, right?
Yeah. Well, today now that's been replaced by the
commercialism.
The phone.
Oh yeah, the phone. Yeah, you're now. Okay,
the
so
internet is the cocaine of life.
so you would know this now as an artist. You would know this. So Spotify and all these type of things. I mean, I'm sure the record label companies are making a killing off it. Artists are probably not getting as much in royalties through those Apple or Spotify, but is it helping? I mean, I know you're no longer like it's more, but do you know if it's helping?
I don't know.
You still have friends in the business, right?
Yeah, but I don't even have Spotify. I can tell you that. So that.
Do you have vinyl records and a record player, man? You got
no, man.
No. The ocean, probably the waves is enough.
By car or by boat.
Yeah.
There's no room for record players. But I tell you what I do have is I have spear guns that are made out of teak wood. When you're underwater and you spin around, they have a absolute perfect balance. Does that count?
It does.
I know,
but you know what? Again, I'm a person that appreciates hand craftsmanship, and that's probably something on your travels that you've seen a lot. You just mentioned that earlier about what we're missing and lacking, and people being able to do things by hand, make things by hand. If you're traveling in New Zealand or you're traveling, any remote area, and see how those people in those countries, when they're isolated, make things, create things, and survive. It's absolutely mind-boggling and awesome, eh?
Oh yeah, I cannot. If I live to be 100, I will never lose the image of my mind. We were in this atoll, really in the middle of nowhere, in the sort of western southern Pacific, and one of these like remote islands, and the lagoon is around 20 miles across, and a big burst of wind came in. I mean, like at least 50 to 60 knots of wind, and I had like an anchor out, a big anchor, a lot of chain, and we were spinning around. Wow, I couldn't believe it. I mean, you could barely see your hand in front of your face. And across the lagoon, I looked, at about a mile away was a single man on a hand-built, like, trimaran-looking thing. Yeah. And he was extremely low, and he had the sail back, and he was by himself in the most treacherous conditions I could just ever imagine, like 50 plus 60 knots of wind. And he was just, I thought to myself, my God, how can you possibly have the ability to withstand that in something that was made just by like a tree, you know? And they don't even have electrical on this island. And I was thinking about how grateful I was to have this 300-pound anchor and to be like, I felt pretty safe. But I was like really worried. Like it was a lot of current coming out the pass. You know, the island has a ring, and then there's only one way in to this lagoon. And here's this guy just in a torrential downpour, just like a force 10 plus on his. I mean, in this little boat. I just said to myself, you know, that's it. Like anything's possible.
This guy's like, it's another day at the office, right?
Another day. I was just like, am I going to rescue him? What's going to happen here? What? And I just watched him go. Zzz. That was it. I was like, God, no one's waiting up. No one's worried. No one's got a phone. No one's got tracking or GPS.
And the world just continues to evolve, right? Like, so what is the most breathtaking moment you had experience-wise? I mean, there's got to be a moment where you know, I don't want to use religion, but I mean, heaven, God, you know, like you're in a spot where, wow, you know, like breathtaking. I can't believe it.
Well, there are, that's a big question for a guy like me. There are places in the world that we have seen, that I have seen, that as a family and on my own, that I gotta say, there's still a couple of really pristine places. Some of those happen to be in Canada, believe it or not.
Do they? Where about?
My new thing is I don't say. That's my new thing. You know, like some of my favorite secret islands. I was watching Nathan Florence, and like he's like just calling out names of all my favorite places. Him and John, I'm going, what are you doing?
Wow, like, I mean, people then all of a sudden destroy it. Yeah, so, I never thought of that.
Whatever, but I'll tell you, the most surreal moment that I think about a lot is we struck a whale in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, is that the one I saw in video?
Yeah.
I want to share that. I want to share that on my thing.
We struck a dead whale. And, you know, that gave me a huge perspective. And what's funny is...
You're that big. You were that big. Not meaning size-wise, just meaning in the spectrum of life.
Amazing. The feeling of going over it, and the feeling on the running gear of your boat, and the hull, and then going through the boat and having all the kids in the middle of the boat. And I just thought, water's got to be coming in somewhere. You know, we were probably 1,400 miles from land. And I remember just thinking, is this it? Like, is this how it goes down? It was so surreal. Every moment was so surreal. And it started off so great because, you know, at that time we had just begun to fish, like out in the open. Like, we had a lot of food, so I don't like to fish when I have a lot of food. And then, like, we had room in the fridge. So I was like, okay, it's fishing time. About, 4 or 5 days in, 6 days in. And I threw these lines out. I had 5 poles in the water, going 6 knots, 7 knots. And all of them lit up. All the lines, bam, 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 lit up. And I was like, what the hell? Doc's screaming. He's like 8. He's running around, paw, 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 paw. And he's like running, grabbing the lines, grabbing this light, grabbing that light. And then I saw it. Like, I saw her before we hit her. And I remember thinking, like, wow, this is true chaos. Like, every pole had fish on, and going over this whale. And then you see all the animals that were eating on this whale. And I just couldn't believe, like, the whole open ocean. Like, how could you possibly connect? And, I had prepared for hitting a whale or a container. Like, I had equipment on board for that. Like, there's like a parachute thing that goes on the outside. I had buckets and buckets of this, like, orange, pink mastic that goes on the walls. And then I have these plugs that expand. And I just looked through the whole boat, and there was nothing. It was just, we just got lucky. It was the perfect 1 in a million, go slow, like, we were going so slow. The whale was traveling in our, everything just was luck.
Well, I have buddies that live in Vancouver, and I have players with my agency that we send out to Vancouver, and I've never been there yet in my life, sadly, but it's on the bucket list. And we've been, the last year or two, I think mindfulness has set in, and I'm starting to do things for me again. And want to get out of, I'm not in a massive city, but I'm in a city surrounded by farmland. And I want to connect again with nature. And you see videos in Vancouver in the bays. I saw sometimes where they were in a kayak or they were in a smaller boat, and there's a pod like of orcas there. Yeah. And I'm telling you, man, even just the 4K video, like, I'm getting, like, you get goosebumps looking at it because you couldn't imagine it. And I'm sure being right there, it's almost like that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
The smarts of those big mammals, all those aquatic mammals, but the big mammals, we swam with the whales, several times along the way. And, one time we got in there real close, and in the South Pacific. And I'll never forget, like, Doc and Sophia, like, so close, and having this big male just just hold the fluke back, because they were so close. They were in between his body and the fluke. And so if he would have kept his tail up, the fluke up, he would have run right in it. And I remember thinking, okay, you're 50 feet, your nose is 50 feet that way, and you could be aware of 2 8-year-olds over here? How is that possible that you are making this adjustment? And when I reached my hand out, and he just gently, like, brought his hand just like, and like that same distance between us. Like, I didn't want to touch him. And I, obviously I would never touch an animal like that. But just the sense of the body, like, that he was aware of that. It was a humbling. Now, there's all kinds of those experiences. Game-changing experiences. Thing is that I'm so focused now that it's a fine line. There's so many of us that have this same desire, and you just got to be real careful, because we like we're kind of, as a species, we kind of just like love something, and then we just love it to death, and then we just kill it because we just love it so much, and it's you and me. And then the social media adds this whole like let me show you what I love, and let me show you this thing that I love. But then in the end, you see where you're just stifling it. So now I don't say where I'm going. Yep. I just kind of leave that to where I think it's best. There are just so many of us. I think that there are systems like Malibu where everyone can be out in the water and it's okay. But there are other systems that just doesn't work that well. And places in the South Pacific, there are tons of islands and tons of places where there's just not designed to have a big tourism.
Yeah, they're meant to be yet to be discovered, right?
Yeah.
Or left alone.
Left alone, I think, is a better thing. There's been a couple of islands that I originally had put in my early Facebook, whatever, and I went back and sort of took a lot of those locations out and places out. But I realized, like, when I go back now and I look, like, there's a full cottage industry of people that go out there, and I know what it takes to get there, and I know, that many boats in the water. It's disturbing. I think one of the most fascinating things that I've been reading about through this whole pandemic is how zoos that don't have people in them, and how the population expansion of, whether it's a panda that hasn't made it in like 10 years, all of a sudden, when you got people and the noise pollution, the bodies, the motors, the engines, the cars, the buses, the ice cream man, everything out of it, all of a sudden, there's a sort of like a balance, like a new balance comes into play. And all of a sudden animals are mating and multiplying, and a lot of those, that stress goes away. There's a lot of places right now that I think about all the time where it's just like, wow, I can't even imagine how many people have been there now. It's just how did you get there?
Are we ignorant? Are we ignorant?
I don't know that we're ignorant. I think humanity as a whole is good. But I think that we each have a selfish desire to experience as much as we can, and that's pretty normal. Like, we all, especially those of us that are attracted to nature, you just got to watch that you are in tune. And I think that's the main thing. I mean, you give 1 million people on the Great Wall of China, and it's not going to hurt it. But you cannot put 1 million people off the little islands in Stewart Island in the south of New Zealand. You cannot bring domesticated animals into parts of New Zealand. The kiwis, birds are so delicate, and there are ecosystems that are just so delicate that it just, it's better off watching National Geographic. There are so many times, and I mean this wholeheartedly, that I've taken the opportunity where I say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to film this. I'm just going to enjoy it. And I'm not going to post. I'm not going to do any of those things, because this is just better off the experience. And have that experience. There are islands in Honduras, for example, that there are certain islands in Honduras where you can take a whole bunch of people, and it's just designed for tourism. And that's great. And there are other places where there's whale sharks, and and it's just better left alone. And I think that if you're the kind of person that can tread lightly, then you should go there. But I don't think you should post if you're in these extreme, remote, ultra sensitive ecosystems. If you're in the Bahamas, and the Bahamas is designed to take vast crowds now. It's just not the pristine thing that it was before, and it's designed for it. You put a number of boats in a bay, but there are bays that I've been in Laval that just cannot take any more boats. You cannot put any more boats in these bays. Super yachts, adventure yachts, explorer yachts. Riley and Elena and have produced an entire barrage of young men and women on their sailboats, just everywhere. And I love it. I think I'm all for it. It's just you have to make sure that when you get there, you tread lightly, super, super lightly. And you have to be totally aware of everything that you put out. The Southern Benthic in Canada is another place that I just think it's just like, there are places where you could put all the people and you could go, coho salmon fishing, whatever. And then there's these sacred places within there, Nuhawk tribe. You just don't go. I mean, you just cannot go. And so I think that's the balance that we're all trying to find. Everyone wants to experience as much as they can in the life that they have. You just gotta watch. And along the way, I'm all for adventure. I just want people, when you go there, just pick up a few pieces of plastic, because it's there. No matter where you go, the Arctic, the moon, there's plastic.
Yeah, I mean, just think about the amount of people in the world. If someone just picked up a couple bottle caps or plastic cups, even threw them, or bagged them up and took them with them, how much, we would be doing, right? Like, I'm gonna, it's almost been an hour, so I just get like one or two more questions for you, and I'll let you go because you look like you're warm there. So
Wedding?
no, it's just like you, either that or you're tan. I've been working on my tan, but you look.
Oh no, I am.
So we're, and I'll say we're, meaning society over here is peering out to you because essentially you are over here looking back at society, being out on the ocean. Are we in trouble? Like, you know what I mean? You're looking at land. Land looks at you. Land just sees ocean, but you see what's intruding or what's happening.
Yeah.
Is there a major cause for concern? Or
I would say the short answer is that we're probably in more trouble than we think we are. But also, the world is big, and there's still a lot of pristine world out there. But that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. I do think that I am personally not a big fan of scaring people into doing the right thing. I just don't think it works.
Yeah, education is better than using. I don't want to say propaganda or fear mongering people, but just educating people.
Right. I think that fear. I do believe that we have the ability. And surfers are the worst. I got to say this: surfers, we have a blind spot. We seem to have a blind spot for pollution in the water. Like, it's just so weird that we can ignore that. Like, we surf dirty water, and very few surfers, up until rather recently, it's just like our natural instinct. Like, we don't notice like that there's a plastic bag floating by or whatever. And now I think we do. I think it's better. But as a whole, I think like surfers have a blind spot, and I'm trying to work on that. But I think that we protect what we love. That's more important. I think that if you can get people to love, in general, and I'm just, obviously these are general terms and specifics are obviously different than generalizations. But I don't see in the parts of Canada that we frequent the same sort of lack of understanding. Like, I don't see rampant areas of pollution like I see in the United States. And I don't care if it's a remote farm, on your way out, towards, any of those Western islands. And I don't mean like down south where it's populated. I'm talking about, the true Western part of Canada, middle of nowhere. And
like Montana, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Yeah.
There's trash everywhere in the United States on all those roads. And I don't know who's picking it up. I don't know whether it's just us people or whatever, but there's just a sense of the overall that the earth is not it has a limit, and it's a finite resource. Also, a lot of the guys that I run into, just me, in Australia and New Zealand, they have a greater sense of the value of the resources. I think that as a whole, America and the world, the big polluters of the world, have to understand the value of the resource.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we have vastly diminished the shark population around where they used to be, places where they used to be. But I also know that there are also vast shark populations where I never thought I would see them. Okay? And those numbers that what I have seen with my own eyes, which is non-scientific, were boggling. So are the fish adapting, going further out, going further away? I don't know too many people that have spent too much time in the middle of the ocean. I don't mean like 200 miles. I mean the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Spend time in areas where the middle of the ocean is kind of like the desert. You don't normally see that level of species like I have seen. That being said, where I normally would expect to see sharks and things like that. It's
Nothing.
decimate. I mean, the numbers are. It's like, I mean, 90%.
Is that warming or like? I mean, I know.
No, that's take 100%.
Oh, is it? Oh, so are we talking like shark finning stuff?
Just consumption, take,
Yeah, take. Okay.
netting, all that. That's just happening.
Yeah.
But I have seen vast shark populations in areas where I'm real glad that I don't see boats there. I'm real glad that.
So again, it's the not discovered, and when you pass through there, you keep your mouth shut because
and this is obviously not scientific, but I have been in the ocean my entire life, and I've been under the water in these same areas, and I see certain areas that have come back, and I've seen areas that have been ultimately depleted. You know, where my dad was the first surfer, him and his friend Whitey Harrison here in Southern California at San Onofre, I have never seen a shark ever for the first 30 years. Now it is just almost every time you go on any given weekend or weekday in a period of 24 hours, someone will say, "Oh, I saw a great white jumping out of the water."
Wow.
That's new. And maybe Pete Peterson and E.J. Ogier and those old timers, maybe they saw that too, but I haven't seen it. And I know that Kala Alexander out in Hawaii has a tiger shark boat tour that they do out there. I don't recall seeing those numbers that's so predictable, and yet there are other places in Tahiti where I would, I shouldn't say Tahiti, but just in the South Pacific, where I would expect to see the migration numbers hugely smaller than I've ever seen it before. And that might be in connection with those large fishing super seiners that you see out there, the arbitrary fleets, shark finning, all those things are all connected. We got to teach people to love, and that's what you protect. I just believe in that the fear-mongering of all this is one side of the story, carrot and sticks. But the other side of the story is, like, in some ways, kind of Steven Spielberg did more for the decimation of sharks than anyone.
Yeah.
If I met him, I would say to him, dude, you didn't need to make that story that way.
Yeah,
know?
People have the fear of sharks now, right? And that they're, like a monster, right? That's the first thing. But again, I mean, they got a lot of teeth and everything. When you see them, you could be scared. But again, in awe, man. Like, if great white, see, you were in the music side of it and got into this. And I remember seeing Paul Walker get in before he passed away, getting into, they were tagging great whites and actually tracking them on I think it might've been Discovery or whatever, or the Nature Channel or National Geographic. And they were tagging because they wanted to know the migratory routes of the great white sharks. Right. And again, like you said, it wasn't for fear mongering, it was for educating. And they said the same thing, that Paul was like, it was almost like he wanted to pet them when they were coming right up, like that they were beautiful creatures of the sea, right? Not to be feared of, right?
Well, dogs bite people too, but I love dogs, right? And part of the reason we don't generally fear dogs is because there's a lot of movies and a lot of culture and a lot of experiences that it's awesome, but dogs bite way more people and kill way more people than sharks. But I think that early on, my dad used to say that back in his day it was about wolves, that he was like, before people were in the water, it was like wolves were like this fear, and people used to go out and kill wolves, and throughout the world, Canada and throughout the North America, we've just almost decimated the wolf population. Then somewhere around the 60s and the 70s, stories came out, wolves were bitching, and then guys running around with wolves, and then the wolf story. And now all of a sudden we've seen the value of wolves, and guess what? Now we're bringing back the wolves. I was staying at a campground in Canada. I won't say where. And the guy said, "Well, it's time for you to move along." And I'm like, "Really? Why do I got to move along?" He goes, "Well, right about now the wolves will start coming in." I go, "Well, I'm not too scared of wolves." He goes, "Oh, no, son, I'm telling you, you got to go." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, it's their land and you got to go."
They're like curious children. That's all they are, wolves. I mean, where I am, there's, coyotes tend to be a little more vicious than wolves themselves, because we do have them in our area, both of them. But yeah, those are the things of the
Protect what
experience.
you love. You protect what you love, and we now don't look at wolves in the same way. And I'm hoping, like I would love to make a documentary where I hunt down Steven Spielberg and I force him to make a movie, like a short that's like the anti-Jaws.
Yeah.
Right? Like I always like think like like Finding Nemo did more for sharks, like to bring it somewhat back. But if we have no good examples, and it's all fear, and it's all it's so easy, like nobody cares.
Well, you could have it where you mix a documentary or a short flick where you have a bunch of people who are nature people that take shark finners and feed them to the sharks in return for payback, right? So I mean, that one might be worth it, right? I mean,
Too much for me right there.
so I'm gonna wrap things up here.
Okay.
I just want to ask you, amazing life. I mean, through your parents, childhood, rock and roll with like a hit single. Now with your own family, your wife, you're traveling. Would you change anything?
God, the only thing I would change is my old landlord in Malibu. He said, you should buy my house. I was like, well, how much you want for this thing? This is back when I had hit records and stuff. And I thought, I'll take $1.5 million. That's my only regret, is that I should have bought that house.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, that's my only regret, because it's probably worth like $20 million now.
See, in that shop. No, you only wish you had bought it to turn around and flip it now? Is that why? Or
yeah, I probably would have rented it, and then I would just have this like endless
supply
stream, so that I could just just stay out there and just continue to just fight the good fight. It's expensive.
Oh yeah, that's how I wondered how you did it. I mean, I know how you do it, and I know even people that take you in and help too, and
yeah, but
friends.
More than that, I just saved up my money. I don't drink. I never took drugs. I just kind of like saved my money. I lived real simple, and then sold everything, and then but I have pretty much, through this experience of just picking up trash, I pretty much bankrupted my family from it. But
no, I think you didn't bankrupt them. You gave them an education.
I gotta live. Listen, if I live like Gandhi, I'll survive.
There you go, right? So
that's my story. That's my one regret, that my dad never taught me about money. Like strange enough, I made a lot of money in my career. Like, wow, I look back at it. What did I do with all that?
What did you do with it?
I lived, and I
but you don't strike me as a materialistic.
No. I just, it just, time goes by, if you think about it, like 2000 was 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I've been just, I don't have any other skills. Oh, and also like, it was real expensive making my kids, and because we're older, like my wife and I started a bit older, and it's a whole different world when you're older. And like Solomon, like he's just a miracle baby,
Yeah.
And I will say that I pray before I eat, every time before I eat, because I'm so freaking grateful for everything that I have. And I just, I'm at that time, age-wise, in my life, like this is where my dad like did his really big adventuring. Like all the experiences people know my dad is like from 50 on. Like before that, he was, people don't really know his history. Like everyone knows him as this older dude, and I'm looking forward to the next few years and the next this part of my life, because it seems like I know who I am now, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
It's soul searching, man. Soul
Yeah.
searching is what it
Round
is.
peg in a round hole. I think that's the meaning of life. Like, happiness is maybe the meaning of life. My dad said that. So,
Well, before I let you go, I just want you to, if you've got anything that you want people to know, meaning if there's any organizations or if there's anything that means a lot to you that people could check out, whether it's to educate themselves, not to be feared or pushed on, but educated, or if there's any foundations or if there's anything that is close to you, I want to make sure that you can say any of it now, and maybe I can post it on the podcast as well as
yeah.
the videos.
I mean, we have our foundation, a little foundation that we've just getting off the ground, which is a sort of a collective way that people can sort of help us. We have, essentially we have two missions, which is helping kids that have never seen the ocean see the ocean in its larger form. And there's a lot of inner city kids that have never seen the ocean. Kids that live in Los Angeles and have never seen the ocean. And so that's been a kind of interesting, like, sort of joyful thing, seeing someone that sees that. And then obviously, plastic and the protection of the ocean. So we started the Paskowitz Foundation in honor of my dad, the Paskowitz plastic pickup. And we're trying to come up with a couple of things that help us pick up more trash, more plastic pollution, rather than just having it disappear. So that's starting now, and the Paskowitz Foundation, our little thing, will get going this year and the beginning of next year. Obviously, the COVID's changed a lot of that. We have sort of everyone, we're just kind of like in a holding pattern. But I'm really grateful for the people that come up to us, and the people that see us, and you'll see us here in Southern California beaches and up and down the coast, all the way into Canada. We surf all the way up to Canada, and you'll see us. It's just a little family. We're just us, and you just see us on the beach. There we are. We surf, or we dive, or we do whatever, and then there we are. We just take our stuff and we pick up all of our plastic. One things that we do that's slightly different from anyone else is we take it with us.
Yes.
We take the plastic with us. We don't just put it in a bin. We have this giant bag, and we fill that bag, and then we have friends in a company called Waste Management here in the United States, and they help us. We've been working on ways of taking that plastic, which is true pollution and cannot be recycled, and getting rid of it in their systems that they have. And so that's been our sort of an interesting thing that we're working on, is bringing the city to the islands, and also bringing some technology with us so that we can take more plastic, pick it up, and get rid of it there.
And that's why I admire you, and I admire the family. Like I said, again, the music is when I first knew about you years ago. Discovering your dad's story, discovering your transition to where you are now, your family and what you guys are doing. I have mucho respect for your family. I wish you well. I wish you safe travels and health among the family. It's amazing the conversation we had. Yes, it's an hour. I do want to let you go, but it's amazing to be able to learn what you guys have done, and I want people to educate themselves more. So I'm going to share your family Facebook page.
Great.
I want to share that on the iPods on all the platforms, and I will share it on Facebook and YouTube. And if I can, if you have a link to any of the foundations or stuff that you're doing,
sure, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me and we'll post it. All right, bye.
There's quite a few floating babies where
Well, you guys take care, and Adam, I know you guys are a private family, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and thank your wife Tracy for allowing that to happen as well.
Thank you, bro.
Okay.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye. Take care.